Welcome to this explainer, where we're diving into the dense, multifaceted history of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines. This is a story fundamentally driven by the fiery heart of a volcano. Today, we're going to explore how geology didn't just shape the landscape of this beautiful Caribbean nation, but actively forged the destiny, the resilience, and the fierce independence of its people. Let's get right into it.
Now, 600. That's an incredible number. This nation is actually a sprawling chain of over 600 islands and islets, including famous spots you might know, like Bakia and Mustik. But while the Grenadines make up a huge part of its territory, the nation's historical destiny was truly forged by the rugged, mountainous, and heavily forested terrain of the main island, Saint Vincent. It's the kind of landscape that just naturally bred isolation, protection, and defiance. Long before any European ships appeared on the horizon, there was a stark contrast in the early settlements here. The islands were initially populated by the Arawaks. They were seafaring and largely peaceful agrarian people who set up small villages. But eventually they were displaced by the Caribs. And the Caribs? They were exceptionally resilient and absolutely formidable in naval combat. As we're going to see, they masterfully leveraged the rugged, steep volcanic terrain of Saint Vincent to their absolute advantage, creating what was basically an impenetrable fortress.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the volcanic foundation, move into the era of conquest and fierce resistance, and then look at plantations, slavery, and emancipation. After that, we'll cover the road to independence, the vibrant culture and heritage, and finally, modern challenges and resilience.
Part 1. The Volcanic Foundation, forged by La Soufriere.
The towering La Soufriere volcano stands at over 4,000 feet, and it literally gave the Caribs their identity. They proudly called themselves the Sons of the Rock, and they named the island Yulu, Maine. Those steep volcanic rocks, dense tropical rainforests, and sheer cliffs, they weren't just pretty scenery. They provided the absolute perfect, inhospitable interior for the Caribs to launch highly effective guerrilla tactics against literally anyone who tried to conquer them.
Section 2. Conquest and fierce resistance, the centuries-long struggle.
The crucial takeaway here is the sheer length of the resistance. The Sons of the Rock mounted a relentless defense against the Spanish, the French, and the British for centuries. That is far longer than most indigenous groups in the Caribbean managed to hold out. Christopher Columbus arrived back in 1498, right? But it actually wasn't until the late 1700s that Europeans truly gained a foothold. The Caribs fought fiercely. They repeatedly used the island's natural watershed and dense forests to ambush hunting parties and evade capture, completely forcing the European powers into this massive, continuous cycle of conquest, pacification, and broken treaties.
To really understand the intensity of this resistance, which continued even as plantations were being established, just look at the thrilling 1770 banquet assassination plot. Tanyan, a runaway enslaved man, meticulously planned a massive revolt to overthrow the British enslavers. The goal? To assassinate the governor during a lavish banquet on June 27th. And the plot was only foiled because a letter in Tanyan's handwriting was intercepted right at the last minute. The governor survived and led a defense, but man, this moment perfectly captures the absolute powder keg of tension on the island during this era.
Part 3. Plantations, Slavery, and Emancipation, the Sugar Economy, and a Hollow Freedom. Notice the specific wording here. Slavery was officially abolished in the British colonies in 1834. But get this, emancipation actually introduced harsh new slave codes. The newly freed people were subjected to severe penalties for even minor disobedience. Literally, just using insulting language could mean 14 days of hard labor. So they were effectively reverted into a hard-pressed state of labor, legally bound to the exact planters they had supposedly just been freed from. It was, tragically, a completely hollow freedom.
Over time, the island's export economy evolved strictly to match the demands of colonial powers, relying super heavily on that incredibly rich volcanic ash. The early British tried tobacco and cotton, but they pretty quickly realized sugar was far more profitable. So sugar dominated the 1700s and 1800s, and that completely reshaped the island's demographics through the horrific reality of the slave trade. Later on, jumping to the 20th century, the economy shifted to bananas. And today it relies heavily on modern tourism.
Section 4. The Road to Independence, Unions, Politics, and Self-Governance. Driven by the rise of trade unions in the late 1940s and a really passionate, growing desire for self-government, the political landscape of the island rapidly transformed, and there was a massive jump in 1951. Universal suffrage expanded the voter base from just 3,500 people to over 14,000. That is a game changer that truly empowered the masses. So after decades of constitutional commissions, some incredibly heated elections, and shifting political alliances, this long, hard journey finally culminated in the adoption of their own flag and anthem and full independence from Britain in October 1979.
Part 5. Vibrant culture and heritage, a unique fusion.
With independence came a powerful reclamation of identity, and the nation's diverse roots absolutely burst into life during Vincy Mas. This is a multi-week summer carnival festival that is quite literally the heartbeat of the culture. It's fueled by high-energy Afro-Caribbean music, specifically fiercely competitive calypso and soca. It features juver, which is a traditional pre-dawn street party, dazzling costumes, and a deep, unifying community pride that reclaims the streets in a beautiful display of freedom and heritage.
And you can actually taste this blended history in the local cuisine. The super fertile volcanic land and the surrounding waters provide exceptionally fresh ingredients. African, French, and English colonial traditions basically transformed all these raw materials into iconic local dishes. Whether it's a comforting bowl of callaloo soup, freshly caught fried jackfish, roasted breadfruit, or, of course, a glass of their famous local rum punch, the food is a direct reflection of the island's incredibly complex past.
Section 6. Modern Challenges and Resilience. Living on the edge of a crater. Now, the nation's dedication to social progress is totally undeniable. They boast an outstanding 96.5% literacy rate. That actually outpaces a lot of neighboring countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it's driven by a system where primary education is free and compulsory, and where they've made massive strides to expand secondary and tertiary education.
However, we definitely have to look impartially at the significant economic hurdles they face as well. For example, the nation experienced a pretty steep 18.5% unemployment rate in the early 2000s. This was triggered heavily by the loss of preferential trade agreements and a subsequent major slump in the critical banana industry. It's a really stark reminder of how vulnerable small island developing states can be to shifting global markets.
But the nation's greatest modern test brings us right back to where we started, the volcano. In April 2021, La Soufriere erupted violently once again. Over 20,000 people had to be evacuated. The sheer amount of ash and destruction drastically reshaped the agricultural landscape and forced the country into a long, really expensive recovery process. And this was right in the middle of ongoing global economic challenges.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. How do you build a sustainable future when your history, your economy, and your very land are born from an active crater? The story of Saint Vincent and the Grenadines is one of profound, unbelievable resilience. From the indigenous sons of the rock fighting off giant empires, to the enslaved Africans surviving brutal sugar plantations, to modern citizens rebuilding after catastrophic eruptions, their unyielding strength is absolutely as deep-rooted as the volcano itself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history beneath our feet.